First question for the evening is directed towards the Commissioner and to Mr. Prabhakar. It comes from Shanti Shah, and she states, the Governor went to India a few years ago to establish a trade partnership between India and Minnesota. We, as a community, heard a lot about that trade mission. Commissioner, can you speak a little bit about the successes and failures of that partnership? And going forward, we're going to have a new administration coming in. As we all know, there are several gubernatorial candidates that join us this evening. Can you please speak to, both of you, speak to the efforts that should be made to grow that partnership in the next 4 years?
Thank you. Let me speak a little about that, and then others on the panel may have opinions. Trade missions are always a starting point. They're the leveling, but they shouldn't be the end. We have continued to do more and more to help Minnesota companies learn about India. We've started a training program that we call an India Practicum and run it frequently across the state. And it's a day that very honestly starts with some beginning geography about the country, because many Minnesota business people don't know a lot about it, but gets into the basics of how to do some market research, how to identify partners in India, and how to begin doing business. As I indicated, we've had many visitors here from the Indian government. We've signed a sister state relationship with the state of Haryana, and have had some activity there. The University of Minnesota had a delegation in October of 2009 to Haryana. As I indicated, about 15 Minnesota companies have established operations of some sort. Most of those before the trade mission, some have grown since then. A number of smaller companies continue to be active in that market. We also have had a number of Indian companies visit Minnesota and work with the trade mission, or trade office, excuse me. In terms of going forward, the trade office is staffed by career professionals that are non-political, and the trade office tends to continue on from administration to administration, as does almost all of state government. The executive branch of state government has about 30,000 employees, of whom 200 are gubernatorial appointments. Some of those are essentially career and stay on, but it gives you the idea of how much of government is more permanent in nature and continues to do its work from administration to administration.
Thank you. Actually, I was not part of the trade mission, but we had representatives from IBM go with Dan to India. And part of the results of that trip also generated in Rochester. By the way, I live in Rochester, Minnesota, which is a little bit south of here, and there is an Indian community there as well. But we have started a program sponsored by IBM in the local community college, Rochester Community College, on how to do business with India, and that is all spun off from that visit that the governor established as well. And Pearl here is sitting in front, was one of the instructors for that class as well. But in addition, IBM was also focused on having technical advocates, and I'm mentioning IBM because I happen to work for IBM, but it's no reason why this is not done by other companies, or it's not being done by other companies. We have technical advocates from the US focused on different specific geographies and areas within India to help the local people figure out how to do and create business opportunities in the US for products and services that are being developed in India. So a lot of those just to make it easier to do business between the two countries.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Suhag Shukla, Legal Counsel and Managing Director for the Hindu American Foundation, based here in Minnesota, and it's directed to Professor Rao. In dealing with the erosion of the church and state divide in public education, Texas case in point, how do we address this when so many in our community become uncomfortable with the prospect of faith-based advocacy?
Where are you, Suhag? There you are. Okay, good. Let me tell you a story Suhag told me the last time I met her. She was lobbying a congressman from the South and mentioned that she was with an association that had the term Hindu in it. And the congressman asked her whether she was a Shia or a Sunni. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is 10 years ago you probably wouldn't have known that there were Shias and Sunnis. My personal bias, she's talking about the Texas Board of Education vote that came out yesterday. By 11-4, they voted to drop Jefferson from the curriculum and include John Calvin. There are several dimensions to the impact of textbooks, and the reason it's important because Texas is a big state. There's a lot of textbooks sold in the Texas public education system, and that has an impact on the standards for textbooks in many of the remaining states of the Union. So the question is, what do we do to ameliorate that? And I think the best response, again, from my biased viewpoint, is education. And you've got to catch them young. You've got to catch them young, you've got to catch them at home, you've got to catch them through art, you've got to catch them through technology. My children are Facebooking constantly with people in Hong Kong, China, and with people in India, and people in Australia. By expanding their horizons, by their recognizing that their competitor is not Joe Smith in that classroom, but is some kid named Ashish. I constantly threaten my children they're going to be working for Ashish at the great state. These are the kinds of things that we can do as individuals, as a society at large. I think we have the opportunity to vote for people who are not anti-intellectual, and we need to work to ensure that those kinds of people, their feet are held to the fire once they're in office. And I guess my time is up.
Our next question is directed to Mr. Mukherjee, and it comes from Rajiv Nair. Rajiv states, or asks, when you bring a group of people from diverse cultures together, how do you break down the barriers imposed by cultural differences and mental models and get them to truly collaborate?
We bring them together because we have a very clear intention that we want to ask the tough questions. We face the mirror and say, this idea of kumbaya, we are the world, is all a bunch of bull. Because we always seem to find comfort in discussing in areas where we are already similar. You know, when people talk about how our cultures are similar, you know, areas where we are similar, there's no problem. Why talk about it? That's not the area where we truly have any problems. The problem is where we disagree. What do we do with life is all about, addressing your own prejudices and then getting rid of them, So I was sitting very comfortable thinking that I've got, now the changing demographics of the US is that by the year 2020, the majority will be the Latinos, right, Spanish-speaking community. So I had a friend, Liliana Espandoburu from Argentina, and Alberto Panelli, who's actually Olympic swimmer. Olympic sinner. How do you sin in an Olympic manner? I'll ask the Catholic Church. And I thought that these two people will be the best of friends there. But they don't agree on one darn thing. They don't agree on anything, starting from pronunciation of their names, forget agreeing on the script, politics, gender politics, they don't agree on anything. So how do we really do that is provide the space to have the disagreement happen, to really acknowledge that true growth and real breakthrough comes from messiness. And we are embracing that messiness. And the only request that we have in Pangea is that in our theatre is that nobody will leave the room with residue in your heart. So if you disagree, you stay there. And you argue and you put your points forward, and we all are there to participate. So the point is that we have a deep intention to truly collaborate. And it takes a long time, you see. And this collaboration, this type of deep consciousness does not emerge over a 2-hour period of a workshop on diversity. We don't know what diversity really means. Multiculturalism, no people of color coin these terms. So that's why we do not know how to really deconstruct and define ourselves under these terminologies and umbrellas which we have never constructed. So therefore we almost need a new nomenclature which is beyond diversity, which is beyond inclusion, which is beyond thinking that we are doing diverse production with only one African. This binary of race conversation is really passé, because that's not what the street says. So therefore, it's a very simplistic answer to a very deep question, I know, but I think the intention to truly collaborate is at the core of that consciousness. And sometimes we fail, but we don't fear failing.